With many games trying to capitalize on the Halloween aesthetic, I'd like to highlight one that you might have initially ignored. Pumpkin Jack is an action platforming game, basically developed by one guy, Nicolas Meyssonnier. I'm so sorry. There are a few other people to credit too, but for the most part, this is about as indie as a game can get. Except, one might take a look at Pumpkin Jack and think, this doesn't look indie at all. Where's the pixel art? Where's the Shovel Knight cameo? First impressions of Pumpkin Jack have it looking like it has a relatively higher production value, being a full 3D platformer with well-designed environments and character models, etc, etc. And it's not just any kind of 3D platformer too, it's a 90s styled action platformer with multiple different kinds of weapons, attacks, challenges, and various alternative gameplay modes, like puzzle sections. Similar to Medieval on the original PlayStation, you play as a sword-wielding warrior as you navigate haunted woods, medieval castles, and various other Gothic and Tim Burton-inspired worlds and levels. You have a talking crow and owl companion that your character, the notorious Jack, constantly does well to berate and insult. The entire game's script in general is very tongue-in-cheek. The story is kind of unimportant. You're an old warrior's soul who's been brought back to fulfill a mission, and you proceed to go and do said mission. It's not complicated.
This might be the fun I've been looking for. So in response to the wizard's quest, he called upon a champion of his own. Stingy Jack, history's greatest trickster and con artist, banished to wander the world as a wayward spirit.
The game is broken up into linear levels that feel fun and dynamic, if albeit quite repetitive after a while. I suppose when you're just literally one guy, it's not easy to constantly design entire new world textures and maps, so having some rather consistent backgrounds and musical tracks isn't the end of the world. You could call it acceptable repetition or something in this case. That being said, there is still a good amount of variety in the game, ranging farther than just its aesthetics. There's differing kinds of attacks and weapons to use, like a floating sword or a shotgun and more. As you progress through the game, new tools and abilities become accessible to Jack. Level structure for Pumpkin Jack is linear, moving from level to level without the need for backtracking or interconnected levels, anything like that. It's a very simple single-player formula, but in a more casual hack and slash like this, it works exceedingly well. Especially when one is looking for a more streamlined gaming experience, Pumpkin Jack delivers, very rarely ever giving a challenge that requires too much brain power or outside-the-box thinking. The worst you might see are memorizing rhythm puzzles or tight platforming challenges. It's not meant to impede you or anything like that. It's supposed to be a nice, smooth, continuous experience. If you really wanted to, I bet you could clear through the entire campaign in under a day or two, especially if you're in that Halloween vibe and just want to stay in for a night. There's much worse you could do. Certainly the game isn't easy though, and neither are the controls at times either. As a 3D platformer, the game is fine, but not all of the nuances to movements are exactly, well done, I guess? I don't know, refined? With many times where momentum between jumps and overall control during a jump are very off from what was inputted. It's not quite as hard as the fixed jump arcs of the original Castlevania or something like that, but there's times where platforming had me more than a little cheesed. It's just kind of loose and not terribly physically sound, but luckily the developer gave Jack a ledge grab that does alleviate some of the platforming issues. There's also some moments that bothered me outside of platforming, like sudden deaths that come from hitting a wall while riding this floating horse, which at times also was hard to judge in terms of dodging attacks or obstacles. Like, even this thing's jumps aren't super clear as to what they, like, when they start, when they end. It's complicated. Also, you can just die from falling into like the tiniest puddle. What the heck is this? This isn't to say that the controls are bad in Pumpkin Jack, but they're certainly not immediately approachable. You'll need to get used to how the character moves a bit before feeling comfortable. Aside from these issues though, the game is seriously impressive. Yes, the music is a bit cliche, and it even features some rather poor uses of public domain tracks as well as in the MIDI format of the game, which isn't awful per se, but it's really nothing to write home about. Honestly, when all is considered, it's a highly fun and accessible game, one that anyone from kids to adults could enjoy, just as long as one isn't looking for too much depth. When it comes to games that fit the All Hallows Eve aesthetic and aren't just a mindless cash grab on said aesthetic, I must say that Pumpkin Jack seriously satisfies and stands out from the crowd. It's not perfect, but it might just be one of the finest spooky season games around. Give it a try and see what you think.